You're back on.
Okay, because my daddy's side of the family was from Columbus, Ohio, I really don't know a lot about his cousins, his family, and so forth, and I do not know why my grandfather came to Atlanta. My father was one of two children. He had a brother named Frank who had two children, and first cousins of mine, and we're very close. Grew up together. One of them with me, and one with my brother Chuck. So we were together a lot. We spent Christmases, Thanksgivings, and lots of summer times with my grandmother and granddaddy. My granddaddy died in 1953 when I was 12 years old, and that was very upsetting to me because we were very close. I called him Pop. My grandmother, I called her Ma Graham, and she lived many, many years after he died, but I can't exactly. We were living in New Jersey when she died, so it was after we were married, and I did not come home for her funeral. My mother's family I do know more about. My grandfather's name was Zadok Wilder Lassiter. He was a farmer in Wilcox County, Georgia, which is the county seat. Well, the largest town is still the largest town is Rochelle, Georgia. My grandmother was Ava Royal Sutton Lassiter. I do not know how they met. They were married for many, many years. They had 8 children. Mother was the next to the youngest. Her name was Neil. And I am named for my mother's oldest sister, Faustine Lassiter. She never married, and my Aunt Faustine never married, and so I guess to carry on that name. They are both buried right there in Rochelle, right where they grew up, lived there all their lives. It's similar to what Mitch said. My father's mother and dad, he came from Columbus, Ohio, and she was from right outside of what is now metropolitan Atlanta. And the family never accepted him because it was just too close to the Civil War. And he was a wonderful man. This was my pop. But the family didn't accept him, and there was very little visiting back and forth between the two families, so that's why I don't know a lot. My mother's father died, Zadok Wilder Lassiter, died before I was born, so I never knew him. But I do have some pictures of him, and I don't know, in my memory, I always thought of him as a large man, but then I see the pictures, and he was a small man. But he was a farmer. He died young. He had heart trouble, and back then they didn't have the care that we have now for heart disease. And he died young. My grandmother and ladies of the South in that time did not tell their ages, and they did not tell their ages, and she was over 100 when she died. This is Ava. And there is quite a bit of discussion about exactly how old she was, 102, 104. Nobody really knew because they kept no dates, no formal dates. There were no birth certificates. But she was over 100 when she died. And it's interesting that all of the children, the 8 children, lived, except for the 2 brothers, my mother's 2 brothers, lived well into their 90s. And one of the sisters, Dorothy, just died last year, the year before, and she was 104. So they lived long lives. The 2 brothers died younger, probably of the heart disease and stroke. So anyway, those, I do remember a great-grandmother and great-grandfather, and that's what we call them. They lived on a farm in Wilcox County, and they had 2 sons named John D. and Victor, twins, who never married. And whenever we would go to Rochelle in the summertime for to get together for family reunions. We would always go out to the farm to see grandmother and granddaddy. That's all I ever knew to call them. And John D. and Victor. And I do remember that it's the only place I've ever been where the only light was one single light bulb that hung down in the living room, I guess. But it was always fun to go out and see them. And every summer, even now, in fact in 2 weeks, we will get together and have a Sutton family reunion. And it is a huge plan. Hundreds and hundreds of people get together every summer in Rochelle. And we have a fish fry on Saturday night, and on Sunday everyone gets up and goes to church together at First Baptist Church of Rochelle. And that is one of the pictures I have of my grandfather, who I never knew, Zadok. He was on the board of deacons when the church was built, and there's a picture of the men in their wonderful suits and ties, early 1900s or late 1800s, I don't know which, standing in front of the church, and it still looks exactly like it did when it was built. Okay.
Do you know if your grandfather, if Charles went to college for dentistry?
I do not know. I've often wondered, and there's no one really to ask because all of that side of the family, that's why it's important to know family history. I don't know whether he came to Atlanta to go to dental school here somewhere because his practice was here. It was in downtown Atlanta.
What part of downtown?
That I can't remember either, but I do remember.
I think I remember Charlie saying it was 5 Points, right?
That could have easily been because there wasn't a whole lot, but his assistant was the sister of our later Secretary of State, Dean Rusk, who was from Georgia. But his assistant, my grandfather, Pop's assistant was, and secretary and probably ran the office, was the sister of Dean Rusk.
Was he your dentist?
No, he did do some dentistry on me. I do remember that. But no, he was not. He had had a heart attack at a young age, much as my other grandfather had. And by the time I really remember him, he was already retired. And he was a big Shriner, had been the potentate of the Atlanta Shrine, and that was one of the fun things to do, was to go out to the Shrine Temple with him. Because he was always welcomed, and we used to always go to what was then the freshman game on Thanksgiving Day between the freshmen from Georgia Tech and the University of Georgia played a game at Grant Field on Thanksgiving Day, and we would always go. It was done by the Shriners. It was presented by the Shriners, and we would go to that, and then we would go back to my grandmother's house and have Thanksgiving dinner.
And where did they live?
What about the circus? Don't forget about the circus.
Well, yes, and he brought the circus to Atlanta. The Shrine Circus still comes to Atlanta every year, and he was the potentate the first time the Shrine Circus ever came to Atlanta. And as a money raiser, I'm sure. And of course, the old Shrine Temple is no longer there. It is a newer, much fancier Shrine Temple now. But we always got to go backstage, and well, before that even, we could climb on the ropes in the different rings, not circles. In the different rings, we could go out and play on the equipment, and then we got one of each thing that they sold, except Mother said we could not ever have one of the iguanas.
Chameleon.
We could what?
Chameleon.
Chameleons. We could not bring one of those home, but we always got the balloons and the cotton candy. They gave us one of everything they sold, and then we got to ride in the cars of the clowns and do all of that fun stuff. Those are good memories. Now, you asked me what.
Oh, where did they live in Atlanta?
They lived at 650 Cascade Road, which is, Cascade Road is now a major thoroughfare, but the house, and it was made out of Stone Mountain granite, was a very interesting house, and we lived there with them for a while My mother and daddy sold their home on Orlando Street in Atlanta, which is still there, and we're building a house in Buckhead, the first house at 3776 North Stratford Road, and it wasn't finished, and we lived there and with them and I don't know how long. It was I do remember, I have good memories of it, and I have good memories of spending the night with them and with my other cousins, and just they were fun to be with. I do remember my grandfather always stayed up so late at night, probably 11 o'clock or so, I don't really know, but it seemed like he stayed up late, and then he slept late, and then my grandmother would go into the bedroom, their bedroom, when he got up, and she would fix him what we called eggs a la Papa. And it was a special way that he liked his eggs done, and my cousins and I could still laugh about eggs a la Papa. And we'd climb up in the bed with him while he had his breakfast. But he stayed up late and got up late, later than us.
Do you have any memories of going to the farm? Do you know what they farmed? Zadig?
Probably cotton, but I do not know. They probably grew what they needed. In that, there weren't stores. They didn't have the money. I can remember Mother talking about their Christmas was always fruit. Their stocking, that's what they got for Christmas was fruit. They didn't get gifts and all that. They pretty much sustained themselves. I don't know where the money came from. Maybe they sold some crops, but in that area there now it's cotton, and there are some watermelon, peaches, that kind of thing. But probably that.
And they had 2 farms, right?
I know. There were several farms in the family, but I'm not exactly sure who owned all of them. The two of the farms were still in the family until recently, and I'm not sure who owns them now.
Don't forget your grandmother moving down on the farm with Josie.
Well, when my grandmother got sick, she sold her house and moved down on the farm that had been owned by her sister and her husband, and lived there until she died. Until she had to go into a nursing home. And Josie was an African-American woman that had worked in the family, helping to take care of members of the family that were sick, and she, even after my grandmother died, took care of another aunt. And
I went to Josie's farm, right?
Yeah.
Yes, you did, and with the promise that if Josie would help take care of them, of the family members, that they would take care of her when she needed it. And Inez, my great aunt Inez, who was married to my great uncle Joe, did take care of her until she died. She would visit, she put her in the hospital, took care of her, paid the bills, and we all went to Josie's funeral. It was like a family reunion for all of us to go to Josie's funeral. But she had good family too, and in fact, one of her nephews played professional basketball, but I've forgotten his name. So.
How did the family afford to send Aunt Faustine to college?
I'm unsure about that. Aunt Faustine and I talked about it, and it's interesting that she went to Tift College. The girls went to Tift College. The boys did not go to college. They farmed. Max and Kenneth were the mother's two brothers. I'm sure they scraped it together somehow, what the tuition was. And then Aunt Faustine explained to me that each one was responsible for helping out the one under them. And she said, I would buy Madge a coat, or I would send money home for whatever was needed. This was after she had graduated. Aunt Faustine went on to professional school in New York, a part of Juilliard, and then settled in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, but for the rest of her life, until we brought her to Atlanta when she was too old to live by herself. But anyway, each one was expected to help out with the one others, the older, the younger ones. So with clothes and things for the house that were needed. I know Aunt Faustine said she bought the china and I remember the china at the house in Rochelle was gold, white with a gold band around it, and she said she had bought that china and she wondered who had it. And I do know who has the china. It's not. It's Lassie. Lassie, my cousin, has the china. I certainly didn't want it, but that's fine. There's still some of it somewhere.
What other memories about going to Rochelle?
Well, memories of going to Rochelle.
Like as a child, with your grandparents.
Yeah, are always special. It's interesting that I think back about it. Anytime I would write my grandmother, now she had 8 children, so you can imagine how many grandchildren she had. But anytime I ever wrote her a letter, she always wrote me a letter back. It's amazing that I even now remember where the paper was in the desk in the living room of they had a big Victorian house, had a big porch around it with big rocking chairs and a big swing on the porch. And as a teenager, or even preteen really, all the girls, the cousins, would gather together and sit out on the porch in the chairs and watch the boys go by. Just waiting for, somebody to stop and invite us to a party or something. But it's kind of a joke now that we just rocked ourselves to death on that porch, watching and in a small town like Rochelle, that's a joke, that there was very much traffic up and down the street. But we did sit there and watch for the boys. There might have been 3 or 4 of our age at that time in Rochelle. Not a big town. So, but it was usually we all got together in the summertime in August, and it was hot as Hades. But it was always a good time, and we sometimes got together at Christmas or Thanksgiving, but sometimes that was at one of my aunt's houses, Claxton or someplace like that. Sometimes Douglas, but not. I don't have a lot of memories of every Christmas we didn't go and every Thanksgiving we didn't go. Some of them we spent here in Atlanta and went to the Tech Georgia freshman game. So.
As I remember, when your grandmother was about more than 100, she went in the hospital, and the doctor is reputed to have said that she had the legs of a 25-year-old.
Well, and I was lucky I inherited them. I did. Someone told me the other day I had pretty legs. And I said, well, they came from my grandmother. And she was a very healthy woman. The main thing, as I said, she was over 100, but nobody knew. She was still living in her home, the big white Victorian, and there was a rotten board in the big porch they wrapped around the house. So they got a contract, somebody in to repair it, and he took the board out and he put up something to stop her from being able, to go across it. I don't know whether it was cones or a rope or whatever. And she evidently moved it and walked across anyway and fell into the hole, broke her hip, I'm not sure whether it was hip or leg, landed in the hospital in Cordele, and eventually died. So she might still be alive if she hadn't moved whatever they put there to keep her from stepping into the hole where the rotten board was. But
well, and the bathroom was at the end of the porch.
yeah, there was no inside bathroom, but she did finally make up her mind that she wasn't going to walk all the way. You had to go outside to get to the bathroom. You had to go walk through the long porch to get to the bathroom. And she finally made up her mind that she was not going to do that anymore. And she had a bathroom. The rooms were very large, and she had a bathroom put in her bedroom and just put a screen around it. So anyway, certainly, for her age, she was entitled. But it made the daughters furious that she did that. But it was for her own good. that she didn't have to go outside at night.
Do you remember any hobbies that they had?
You know, the people back then worked so hard that they, now my daddy's mother, we called her Ganga, I called her my gram, did a lot of needlepoint. She did knitting, she did tatting, she did a lot of beautiful handwork, and she made us sweaters. And how I wish now I had one of those sweaters that I didn't appreciate when I was a little girl. But she made beautiful sweaters for us, and she tatted everybody that got married. She did. I remember the click, click, click of the two little shuttles as she did tatting, and then she would put it on sheets and pillowcases and kitchen towels. And I have one set of pillowcases that still have tatting on them. I just didn't appreciate it like I would now, and wish I had some of it. Like Mitch's mother made pillows for the children and pillows for us, and you know, you appreciate them as you get older. And I appreciate the pillows that Grandma made for me, but most of them, the rest of the things got, you know, abused. The children abused them, Andy included. Leaving it out in the rain. One of the stuffed animals, I don't remember.
I still have a stuffed animal. And we still have the
Panda bear?
You have the bear.
I have the bear.
You have the bear.
And we have the alligator and the hippo.
Yeah.
And that's in Lily's room.
And that came later. Those
Oh,
things all came later. But
I remember her
this-
making those.
She made us all the same
I think.
sweater. One Christmas, she made us all a white sweater with red and blue. It would look like a tennis sweater. And all four of us.
I remember
and
those.
So we just don't, you know, we didn't appreciate them like we would appreciate it now. So, but my memory is that everybody worked hard. There wasn't, of course, there wasn't television, and there wasn't a lot of leisure time. They were as Mitch said, they were cooking, they were cleaning up. They were washing dishes. They did have in South Georgia, and my grandmother here in Atlanta had a maid, Mildred, that was a maid in the family for years, and I remember her ironing, and I can still hear the creak of the ironing board. But they did have some help that would come in and, you know, do some of the chores, but they worked hard. They worked hard.
There were no TV dinners. My grandmother cooked everything from scratch.
From scratch, and they probably had grown it. And canned. They all canned in the summertime, and you'd go in at the end of the summer, and the kitchen, they would have rows and rows and rows of food that they had canned, tomatoes and beans and peas and whatever that they had grown, and they would eat off of it all year. They didn't go to the grocery store and buy whatever. So they didn't just hop down to the Kroger or the Publix to buy their things. Any more questions?
No.
A lot
Do you
of-
have anything else?
A lot of things will come to mind, but I can't, right offhand. I can't remember anything. They were good times. I had a happy childhood. I was, like I said, did not know one of my grandfathers, but I have good memories of my grandmothers and the one grandfather here. And the times we enjoyed with cousins and just good times. So very thankful that I have that heritage.
You want to tell the story about your name? How you finally...
That can come later. I'll do that one tomorrow.
Okay.
Do you know where my name